things we're hitting are the three things that knocked me on my tail as a young dad. Other gods before the one true God, learning to love as Christ loves, and finally showing my kids the Father. They continue to give me body blows as a seasoned father now. So I just wanted to, I hope last week was enriching to you to get the priorities on the one true God. And this week I want to introduce a dear friend and a man of God for sure. Mr. Scott Wesley is coming up. I want to pray for us, and I'll turn it over to him to share how his journey in learning to love as Christ loves. Lord, I do praise you for this morning. Thank you again for the gifts and blessings in our lives. We never take them for granted. The gift of marriage and family, the opportunity to represent you in the home. There's a lot of places these men could be at this hour. They've chosen to be here, Lord. So we invite you in to be, as you say, where two or more are gathered, you're present. May we feel your presence, even your pleasure. And we lift up the speaker that he would just let go and let you flow through as he brings the word that you want to speak through him. So bless Scott and give him all the energy and clarity he needs. Bless our time together here. In Jesus' name, amen.
I'll give you a little backstory on me. I grew up in Southern California. I'm from the Los Angeles area. Go Rams. And I don't get to say that very often, so I just thought I'd throw that in there. Got out here as quick as I could, and I really mean that. It used to just be a cute thing to say. I'm from California. I got here as quick as I could, but I really did get here as quick as I could, and I'm glad to be here. Arnold Schwarzenegger was the governor when I left California. It's been a while. That really happened. You tell younger people that, they're like, the Terminator was a governor? It's like, he really was. It really happened in my lifetime. But my parents were Los Angeles police officers. My dad was a captain. My mom was a police officer. They met at LAPD. And there's something about cops, they all can tell you, one thing I think they have in common is they all love a good fight. My mother would even tell you that back in her days as a police officer, she loved a good fight, and the apple didn't fall far from the tree. I used to get in fights quite a bit in school. And back when I was a little kid, if somebody said something about your mother, you had to fight them. There was just nothing, and the good thing about that was you wouldn't even get in trouble when you got home. So that was kind of what I was looking for, and I was good at it, and I enjoyed it. It was the only thing I was ever good at. And so I found myself in that situation quite a bit, and grew up kind of getting a little, just on the edge of being a troubled kid, but not completely all the way in. My parents divorced when I was 7 years old, and my dad became a weekend dad, and that was okay with me, actually, because there was a lot less bickering in the house, and I still got to see my dad on the weekends. My sister was a little more broken up about it. And then when I was 14, my sister was 17, my father passed away. He had a massive coronary heart attack, and he was only 47 years old. And so nobody saw that coming. And so my mom, from that point forward, was just the best she could do was to keep food on the table and a roof over our heads and clothes on our back. And as far as everything else went, her mantra was, figure it out. She was, if you think of the helicopter parent that hovers over the kid and keeps him from any harm and all that, my mom was the opposite of that. And so figure it out is really where that was really what we were kind of expected to do. And so my sister figured it out as far as she got married like when she was 18 and was gone, and married well and did well, and her husband was bringing up a small construction business that started to be a big construction business right about that time. I used to work for him. I dropped out of high school and started working in construction, and that was my way of figuring it out. My mom said, you're either going to go to school or work, and work sounded like more fun to me than school. And so I got to have some money in my pockets and do things that I was limited from school. And so I dropped out of school and started working in construction and learned my way around the trades, and got into groups of guys that used to work hard and party hard, and got kind of a little off track. And so I guess to put it in a nutshell, without spending too much time on my testimony, I was kind of the Hunter Biden of our family. Without the political influence. So I ended up in prison. and it's funny, I was thinking about that last week. The guy that Rick had recruited to speak last week also got saved in prison. And so it makes you wonder about Rick. Like, where does he, who's he running with, I don't think the Pharisees would like you very much because you break bread with sinners. And which we do break bread pretty regularly, me and Rick, whenever we get a chance. So anyway, I ended up going to prison after years and years of wild living and addiction and such, and got saved in prison, I can honestly say. I was actually reaching out to the Lord before I went to prison, and his answer to my prayers was that I needed to be locked up a little while and kind of get to a place where I was away from the drugs and the alcohol and the women, and where I had time to do some reading, and it was an opportunity for me to just slow down and hear what the Lord was saying. And so and I immediately started gravitating towards prison ministries and such, and I found great value in those things. And it's just amazing that if you're trying to win people over to the Lord, it's almost like shooting fish in a barrel when you go into a prison ministry, because there's no better time to come to the realization that you need a Savior than when life has not worked out for you to the extent that they've locked you up and put you in prison. And so it was pretty obvious that I needed some help, and it was something bigger and better than anything I can provide for myself. My own best thinking got me there. So I began to get into the Word and pursue the Word. I got out of prison and started doing an assessment on the damage in my life, and basically had several kids out of wedlock, had a whole bunch of child support debt. I had, felonies in my background. I didn't have any real financial support at that time, and was just starting over. And somehow it ended up meandering through a whole bunch of drama. I ended up in East Texas, where I got sent to prison. And so when I paroled out, it was given some really wise direction from one of the ministries I was involved with, that I should go to Houston because there were resources here that could help me kind of restart my life. And my first inclination was not to come to Houston because I didn't know anybody here. And then I realized that was a good thing, because all of my associates were bad people, and all the places I used to live, I was known by the police. And so it was like, hey, how about starting fresh in a place that's just rich with resources as far as ministries and things, where I could get some help and kind of starting my life over again, because I needed some direction for sure. And so I got involved in a ministry immediately after getting released here. I went to a jobs ministry where I got hired on there and ended up working there for about 7 years. And it was just an incredible time of growth for my life. I quickly realized that I had the gift of singleness, and that I was going to spend the rest of my life as the Apostle Paul without a wife, and I was okay with it, and it was all good. I was just going to pursue the Lord, and I just came into agreement about that. And then I met my wife, so the woman who were to become my wife, and she was actually in a similar season in her life. She had been in a really bad relationship a couple of years earlier, and so she just wanted to focus on her walk with the Lord. And she was a single mom, and she was just trying to do the right thing. And when I met her, she wasn't really flirty or anything like that, but she was very interested in me because she had heard me give my testimony, and she was just in love with the story of me and the Lord coming into my life and transforming me in a way that I couldn't have transformed myself. And she was very interested in that, and she began to share her story with me, and it became something that was just drew us strongly together. And then one of our first conversations, it was actually the second time we ever talked, I got up the nerve to ask her out on a date, and I told her, I said, I'd like to ask you out on a date, but I want to get something clear. I said, I'm very firmly committed to sexual purity, and it's not about me trying to get in your drawers or any of that. It's about, I would like to take you out on a date, and I want you to understand that I will never have sex with any woman that I am not married to, because that is what my commitment is to the Lord. And so I began to tell her that. Her eyes just literally welled up like tears. And she said, I've never been in a relationship like that, but I've always wanted to be in a relationship like that. And so the initiating the sexual purity showed her that I respected her and cherished her in a way that she had never felt that way before. And so we quickly came to the understanding that we were going to end up getting married. And we maintained that sexual pure relationship up until our wedding day. And so it was a beautiful thing. It was actually began to help us understand that our marriage was to be a ministry. And now it is our family, our little bubble is basically my ministry. I'm the leader of that ministry. And so that's kind of a bold statement, but I don't need a whole lot of audacity to say that, because that's what we're directed to do. And so, the passage that we're going to focus on is Ephesians 5:25, which says, husbands, love your wives just as Christ also loved the church and gave himself up for her. And so to really break that down, I just need to backpedal to the beginning of that chapter, which is Ephesians 5, verse 1. And it says, therefore be imitators of God beloved children, and walk in love, just as Christ also loved you and gave himself up for us, an offering, a sacrifice to God, a fragrant aroma. And so, as a fragrant aroma. So, and I start breaking that down, I realize that, so if we're going to be imitators of God, what does that look like? We can't see him, but we've been given Christ as the example. And so, is it say, if we're going to imitate Christ, I mean, are we supposed to, each one of us, round up 12 guys and traipse out into the desert to carry the gospel to the ends of the earth? And, you know, it's kind of a large order, but that's not necessarily what it's saying. It's saying walk in love as Christ walked. So he did those things, and we are to be imitators of him, but we're given our own little individual ministries where we can do that. So the husband is to love his wife as Christ loved the church. It's a mirror image of, or a model of, how we're supposed to behave. And so you look at Christ's display of love, right? And so first of all, the word love has been so misconstrued in our society. People think of making love as just a physical act, or some people think, you know, a love is just a feeling where I feel all bubbly and giddy when I look at something. I have my favorite things, and I love this, or I love that food, or I love that team, or I love it when this happens, or I love that song. But Christ's definition of love is basically walked out in how he acted. And so it's much more looked at as an action here. And so the direction we're being given is to act in a way that Christ acted when he was serving his church. And so we're to serve our bride in that way. And so when I have to incorporate that in my marriage, I have to understand that it's not always convenient. I'm not always in agreement with what this woman wants to do, right? She's a strong-willed woman, and she has ideas of her own. They don't always align with mine, but I'm called to love her as Christ loved. And so there's some patience that is required. There's some compromise that is required sometimes. And by all means, it's just a matter of a decision that I cannot turn away from. I'm committed to. And so when we made that commitment, you know, to join our lives together, that whole concept of being one flesh, it helps me understand how I'm supposed to respond, because me and my wife share an Amazon account, right? And so I get an email every time she buys something off of Amazon. And there's a lot of times like, supplements? Why am I paying $59 for some supplement? I can't even pronounce this stuff. Like, why is she buying that? And I start thinking me, and it's my money, right? I'm the provider. I'm the breadwinner in our family, and she's home buying stuff off of Amazon that I don't even know about, you know? And then I have to remember that, hey, we're one flesh. It's her need in her eyes, so it becomes my need. I'm the provider. I'm comforting her in the ability she can place that order and not have to worry about where the money is coming from for that. You know, we have limits. I mean, you know, we don't have extravagant, you know, ability to pay for whatever. But so within the confines of reasonable purchases, I have to be okay with that, and I have to come to terms with that. And so I get to practice this loving as Christ loved on a regular basis. And if I don't, it comes around and bites me in the butt. And so it's that simple. So husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church. So he put his own comfort aside and his own desires aside, and even put his own life aside, and putting hers first, the church being hers first, his bride first. And then, you know, so that he might sanctify her, having cleansed her by the washing of the water with the word. So he put aside and considered her as special and precious. You know, and it's often brought up that, you know, we are the stronger vessel. It doesn't necessarily mean that we're the more important vessel or that we're the better vessel. We're the stronger vessel. And, you know, it kind of makes you wonder that if this woman, and, you know, none of us can claim the claims that a woman can. I mean, these people bring forth a human being from their body. You know, it's an incredible thing what women can do. They're just so precious and so unique and so such an example of Christ's love and the creation and all of those things. And so we're appointed as the stronger vessel to provide for and to protect. And so, and that's what Jesus did with his people. He provided, first of all, he provided the understanding of the kingdom and the understanding of the relationship with God. He provided that to his people, to his church. He provided protection. He was in a humble way. He served, right? He constantly served. And so we have opportunities to do that with our wives and with our kids, to serve and to provide for and to lead. And so, this is our little ministry that we get to deliver on the things that Christ delivered to the church. And so it's a great comparison, but it's also great kind of rules to live by as husbands. And so I'm just in love with the fact that, like, not only is like this all new territory for me, but I have some instructions on how to operate in it. It's not completely foreign to me, and I'm not lost. And when I get to feeling lost, I can go back to the Word, and I can kind of remind myself that I'm called to love. And it's given that direction, I think, because there's a book by Eckhart. It's called Love and Respect. And in that book, he makes the claim that we're directed to love our wives because it doesn't necessarily come natural to us, right? It takes a little extra encouragement, and it takes some direction. And women are also directed to respect their husbands because sometimes that doesn't come natural to them. And so my wife has to, kind of pull back to what the Bible is calling her to do in response. And she's a strong-willed woman, and so and her surrendering and being obedient and all that kind of stuff is something she has to be very intentional about. And so she's directed to do that because it doesn't come natural to her necessarily, and we're directed to love because we have to stay on top of that, and we have to remember that we committed to this. And so whenever I get to sometimes she'll do something that I think to myself, I didn't sign up for this. And then I have to sit back and listen to myself say that, and then I have to listen to what the Lord is saying. And actually, I did sign up for it. I completely signed up. We have a marriage certificate. I got a ring on my finger. We made a promise to God in front of a whole bunch of people. I mean, pretty much all the way signed up. And so, my wife has gone through a season of having some skin issues, some severe like eczema type issues that we can't quite nail down exactly what it is. And in those seasons when she's having those flare-ups, she very specifically does not like being touched. And I'm an affectionate guy, you know what I mean? So I used to take that very personally. And in the back of my head, I'd start thinking, well, this isn't what I signed up for. And it's, oh, yes, it is. Oh, yes, it is. So I get contradicted by this word all the time when I start on my own flesh trying to say, like, hey, well, I kind of would prefer it for this way. She knew I was an affectionate guy when she married me, and then now she's telling me to, like, keep my hands off. And she hands me these kids when I get home from work because she's tired of them pawing on her all day. And I'm thinking in my head, I just worked all day, and now you're just throwing this workload on me, like as if I've been relaxing somewhere all day. So as those arguments start to build up, I've got this internal dialogue that brings me back to this word. And if I don't go back to this word, I'm going to have that continually internal argument until it becomes an exterior argument with my wife, right? And so I didn't realize this, but this whole marriage thing is definitely... there's a lot of work involved. And some of you seasoned gentlemen, I see you got some silver hair in this room. And so you know this, right? I'm not telling you, and I'm preaching to the choir here. But there's a lot of work involved. It's not all honeymoon stuff. And honeymoon's great. And those giddy feelings that we had in the beginning were great. They drew us together. And and I have to go back to that sometimes and remember why I was drawn to this woman. Why she was drawn to me is, because of the testimonies and what we saw the Lord doing in each other's lives. We were both running steadfast towards the Lord, and we realized that we had somebody just like us running alongside of us. We weren't running out into the wild looking for a partner. We were both looking for a relationship with the Lord, and He brought our paths together in a very, very beautiful way. And so we have to go back to that and remember that. And so... Rick had kind of put some bullet points on this handout, and the one that says confusion, I think that what's important is that the world is going to try and confuse this meaning of love, the way I was saying earlier, with all these other, that it's a feeling or that it's a desire or it's having sex or whatever it is. But in this passage, it actually gives the kind of the warnings of how to not get distracted and confused about this. It says immorality or impurity or greed. This is it's Ephesians 5 verse 3. Immorality or impurity or greed must not even be named among you as proper among saints. And there must be no filthiness and silly talk and coarse jesting, which are not fitting, rather the giving of thanks. So, Jesus gives this example of how to give thanks in the Lord's Prayer. And so this is saying that, that's how we should behave, not in, talking trash and locker room talk or whatever you want to call it, and coarse gesturing or coarse jesting, immorality, sexual immorality of any kind. For you know that it is certainty no immoral or impure person or covetous man or who is an idolater shall have an inheritance in the kingdom. It also says to watch who you hang out with, right? Do not let no one deceive you with empty words. For because of these things, the wrath of God comes upon the sons of disobedience. Therefore, do not be partakers with them. So there's a lot of riffraff out there. Do not join in and be partakers with them. Now, we are called to minister to some broken people, but it doesn't say to be partners with them, right? And so, and then we're given the reminder that, hey, you were once in darkness, and so, but now you are children of the light. And to me, that's good news, right? That we are brought out from the darkness. And so in that, I just believe that the Lord has brought us through this darkness to be children of the light, and then allowed us to leverage that testimony to help others. But by all means is to pour into our families and our marriages and our wives. So husbands ought to love their wives as their own bodies. This is jumping ahead to the statement that in verse 25 that says, love your wives as Christ loved the church. It also says that husbands ought to love their own wives as their own bodies. He who loves his own wife loves himself. And so that goes back to providing for my wife is actually, I should do it with the same vigor that I do when I'm providing for myself. When I buy myself something that I'd like to have, or I give myself a gift of some sort, or I have my own thing that I've always wanted and I can finally save up to get. I should have that same desire to provide that for my wife. My wife has beautiful feet, and I get the biggest kick out of buying her shoes. And so whenever she wants a pair of shoes, I just say, just get them. I don't even want to hear how much they cost. And so I have that, and it's in a way, it's very similar to things that I like, and so if I have something that I get something in my head, and I know these are material things, but this is just an example, but if I have something in my head that I really want and I save up for, and I bought some, I have this raggedy set of mechanics tools, and every time I work on a car, I say, I'm going to buy myself a decent set of tools. And I found a set that was on sale after Christmas, and I bought these, the socket and ratchet set, and I was just so pleased with myself. And I went out and did the brakes on my wife's car, and it was like it was so fulfilling. Now, nobody appreciates it but me. It's just that between me and these tools and the Lord really is that I was able to get myself something that was very functional and that I've always wanted, and that I don't have to scour my garage to find that one 7mm socket because there's only one of them. I got it set, and they're all there, and they're all in order, and it just feels so good to have that. And so I want to be able to provide that feeling for her, without having her to make her beg for it. And so whenever, I have an opportunity, I actually look for opportunities to serve in that way. And that, to me, is loving her the way I would love my own flesh, taking care of her in that same way. And so we had these great opportunities to build this foundation of this strong marriage. And what I did not understand is that when you're building a strong foundation for a strong marriage, that there will come tests later to test the foundation and the strength of that marriage. And so we recently had an opportunity to really test the strength of that foundation. And so the Monday before Thanksgiving, my wife, we have 2 children together, and my wife is 13 years younger than me, which seemed like a really awesome idea when we first got married, but then she was not done having children. And it didn't, and I have these older kids out of wedlock, and I'm already in my 50s, and I'm thinking that ship has sailed. And, the Lord blessed us with not just one, but 2 little boys, like one right after the other. They're 21 months apart. And so our second son, who's now 2 years old, he had, and he's, of all of my kids, this kid is definitely the most sturdy and stout and strong-willed and just like a little bull. And so the last one I would ever think to get sick in any way, but along about the middle of November, he started acting like he was in pain when he would get up to walk, and then he got to where he couldn't walk at all. And so we took him to chiropractor, and we kind of follow a little bit of a homeopathic sort of natural healing practices, and don't put a whole lot of stock in all these crazy medications and stuff. And so my wife is trying to get him to do everything possible besides do some blood work. And so for about 2 weeks, we watched him just really basically get worse and worse. And so she finally took him to Texas Children's and to the ER and had some blood work done. And we spent, me and my stepdaughter and my other son were spending the whole day kind of together waiting to hear back from her. And she went to the hospital at like 6 or 7 in the morning and was there all day. So about 4 in the afternoon, after that long day, she called me and she said, "Are you sitting down?" And that's never good when somebody starts that conversation that way. And I did happen to be sitting down, and she told me they say that he has leukemia. And I knew nothing about cancer. I don't know anything about oncology. I'm a lay person, and so to me, that's a death sentence. I mean, my first thought is that, there's going to be a funeral with a little bitty coffin, and I'm just, devastated. And so no sooner does she tell me, I start praying with her on the phone, because that's the only thing I know what to do. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I don't even know how to respond to that. I don't know how to respond to that to strangers, but when it's my own child and my own wife I'm talking to, and then I'm supposed to lead this ship, right? I'm the leader of the ministry, and there's something very, very wrong here. So I just started praying with her. I started praying for the medical professionals that would lay hands on him. I started praying for healing, divine healing. I started praying for strength in our family. I started thanking the Lord for the strength of our marriage. And so we began walking through this journey. And she basically had left the house that morning, and she didn't come home for about 15 days. She was at the hospital with our son. They transferred her from the Katy branch to the downtown medical center branch of Texas Children's, where they admitted him, and he started all of his blood work and chemo and all that stuff immediately. And so we didn't have Thanksgiving this year, and we were into the middle of December by the time she finally got released. They got released from the hospital. I was trying to keep my job going and still spend time with them, so I did a whole lot of all-nighters at the hospital and then working in the day, and did have some PTO, personal time off, built up that I didn't know how I was going to use, and so I got to take a few weeks off throughout December. I think I ended up working 7 days out of the whole month of December. And so at this point in time, we are well into the induction phase of his chemo treatment. He's responding well to treatment, and he's got a very beatable type of cancer, but there's just about 8 months of a whole lot of poking and prodding and chemotherapy and lumbar punctures where they do a spinal tap and they inject chemo into the spine and all that stuff. And dealing with this with a 2-year-old, the Lord has actually blessed us with the fact that he's the strongest little bull of the family, because he handles it very well. He responds very well to treatment. He's a very squirmy kid. I never thought he'd be able to sit still for any of the stuff that he sits still for, but he handles it very well. And the strength of our marriage has been what kept us together through all of this. And so for 7 years, we just celebrated 7 years of marriage last week. We were married on the 7th of February in 2015. And so for that 7 years, there's a lot of work and a lot of commitment that was not very glamorous part of our marriage. But when this little boy got sick and we had to and it was amazing how our family came together. My mother-in-law had just retired from being a school teacher her whole life. So this is her first semester of not working. And so she was able to kind of move into our house and take care of our older son and hold down the fort while we would spend all these days at the hospital. And so now it's everybody just took their respective places as if it was ordered, it was just everybody was just assigned a spot and what to do. And we had, friends that just showed up out of the woodwork to provide support and encouragement, and we got involved with these different ministries that have all these other parents that have kids that have cancer, and we got to meet a whole lot of kids and people that have overcome this type of cancer. So I started seeing all this hope, and the Lord was just providing example after example of people that have overcome this challenge, that have walked through this challenge ahead of us, and has even blessed us to help people that are walking through it that don't know the Lord. And all I could think of the whole time is, how could anybody endure something like this if they didn't know the Lord? I mean, how do you process that? My kid has a life-threatening illness. I mean, how do you just walk through that? And I don't know, but I know that in Christ's strength, he's equipped us in our marriage to go through the next day. And I didn't have the strength to walk through the whole cancer treatment from now until he's considered cancer-free and has, divine recovery in Jesus' name and all that stuff. Yeah, that's all coming, but that's way down the line. How do I get from here to there? Well, and I've been getting the strength of the Lord in a daily measurement on a daily basis all the way through. And so it's so important that my wife and I had this strong foundation that we trust one another. We trust each other's decisions. She tells me one day, we're firing the oncologist. And I said, okay. It sounded like you don't want to do that in the middle of your son's treatment. But she said, no, the lady that's been assigned to him she's at the end of her career. She's like the absent-minded professor. She's got terrible bedside manner. I'm not comfortable with this. We're going to hire somebody else. And she did the research and did the footwork, and I just supported her 100%. And it's been a great change. And so we met a man that she already knew. Actually, she's friends with a guy that she does some ministry work with. And when she told him about our son, it turned out that his daughter was on the cutting edge of the same technology my son is getting. And she's a 19 or 20-year-old girl now that had the same type of cancer 15, 16 years ago. And she had the same treatment team that we have currently at Texas Children's. And so she was on the cutting edge of the research groups that develop the technology that my son is getting today. And the Lord has just woven incredible blessings into our lives through these believers and non-believers alike. We've prayed with nurses and doctors and people administering treatment, and it's become this incredible, sick kid ministry kind of thing where we're ministering to other parents and we're praying with strangers that might never get prayed for. And our boys, my 4-year-old and my 2-year-old alike, are seeing how his parents act in crisis. And it's not to just lose their cookies and be crazy. It's to lean into the Lord and be prayerful. And so it's all going very, very well, actually, and there's just been so many blessings involved. So it has been a true test of the love and the strength of our marriage. And it was not a test that I was looking forward to or that I knew about, but it leans heavily on the foundation that we've built trust from the very beginning. And so I would encourage you guys to consider that little house, that your little bubble, as your ministry, and lead as Christ led, love as Christ loved, and sometimes that strength and foundation of your marriage might be so that you could pour into another marriage, but it also might be getting tested, and I wouldn't wish this on anybody, but at the same time, I think this cancer diagnosis and the full recovery of it is going to end up being a blessing to our family. I immediately, as I was watching my son go through this, I had like a vision of a time later in our lives where my son would be discouraged about something, some challenge in his life. And I'd be able to say, son, I've watched you walk through things harder than this. I've watched you overcome incredible challenges. And I've seen what the Lord can do in a person's life when it doesn't look like they have much of a chance. And so I want to be able to pour that into him and help him understand that he's already a conqueror. He's already victorious in the Lord, just as a little child, as a toddler, So I look forward to that, to be able to pour that into him, and I have a great faith that he's going to be okay. We're just still in the trenches of it, so it's not fun, but at the same time, we're able to be a blessing through this experience, and we've been blessed through this experience. And so I'm so firmly a believer that the way I love my wife and the way that I treat our kids in our house, which I have no, right by my track record to be leading anything anywhere. But again, I go back to the Lord's strength. It's all in the Lord's strength. It's in His strength. And it's through His model of how to do it that I'm able to lead this group of people that He's assigned me to, my little disciples, my little image bearers. And so I'm so very grateful that we have His Word and that we have the guidance of good people and good, strong men. And I encourage you all to have good, strong men in your life. It's the only reason I'm able to do this. I met Rick early in my walk. I just got out of prison, and I showed up at men's, the gathering of men, and Rick happened to be there, and he picked me out of the crowd, and he started asking me about my role as a father. And my role as a father was an embarrassing story because I had I was a deadbeat dad. I had a bunch of kids out of wedlock, and Rick started equipping me to be a good father, which made no sense to me because that ship had already sailed, which I didn't know was I was going to end up getting married in a few years and raising a family, and that all of this stuff would be very valuable information. And so I gravitated back to Rick, and I started drawing upon his wisdom. And of course, as his story goes, which we'll hear more about next week, his ability to be that model father came from a bunch of challenges and failures that the Lord brought him through. And so that seems to be the kind of the thumbprint of the Lord, is that he brings us through hardship and challenges and equips us along the way, and then allows us to be someone that can pour into another man, you know. And so it's a privilege to be here with you guys this morning. It's a privilege to share what I had to share, but I do hang on to this. Love your wives as Christ loved, because I don't know how to do it any other way. And, my way has got me in all kinds of trouble, and Christ's way has got me out of a whole lot. And so I would encourage you all to do the same. And just thank you for your time this morning. And thank you all for being here. Thanks.